"She lives in the river," one says, barely louder than a breath. Another chimes in, "She grants wishes, yes, but her price is heavy, too heavy for most." An elder raises a hand, silencing the murmurs. "Many have tried and most have failed," the elder warns, their gaze sweeping over the listeners. "Remember, the river always takes what it is owed." The wind howls outside, carrying with it the promise of a storm. Far from the safety of the village, a figure steps cautiously into the night. Thunder rumbles across the sky and the wind pulls at the edges of a tattered shawl. Each step is hesitant but deliberate, the weight of desperation driving the figure forward. "Tonight," comes the whisper, barely audible over the storm. "I will ask her. I will beg for a child." The path to the river is treacherous, slick with mud and tangled with roots. The croak of frogs rises in a rhythmic chorus, broken only by the occasional distant howl of a hyena. In trembling hands, a basket is held tightly, its contents carefully chosen. Cowrie shells glinting faintly, ripe fruits fragrant even in the damp air, and a single piece of gold that catches what little moonlight breaks through the clouds. The river comes into view, shrouded in mist and mystery. Kneeling on the muddy bank, the figure closes their eyes and breathes deeply, recalling words long buried in memory. A voice, gentle yet firm, echoes from years past. "Speak clearly. The river listens only to those who honor it." The chant begins, halting at first but gaining strength with each repetition. "Oh, spirit of the waters, hear my plea. I bring my soul in offerings 3. The voice trembles, but the rhythm holds steady, rising above the storm's fury. The basket is pushed onto the water's edge, then set adrift. It bobs uncertainly before the current catches it, pulling it deeper into the swirling river. A sudden gust sweeps through, extinguishing the faint lantern's glow. Darkness envelops everything. The water begins to shimmer, faintly at first, then growing brighter. The glow spreads, illuminating the trees and casting strange, flickering shadows. A sharp intake of breath breaks the silence. Is this a sign? The river splits, parting like curtains drawn open. From its depths rises a figure, ethereal and otherworldly. Silver hair cascades like moonlight, and piercing eyes hold an unearthly power. A smile curves across lips that seem both inviting and dangerous. The voice that follows is melodic, carrying both allure and command. "Who dares summon me on this night?" There is hesitation, but only for a moment. "It is I beg for a child." And the smile fades, replaced by something colder, sharper. The figure leans forward, the voice now a whisper that cuts through the air. "Are you ready to pay the price for what you seek?" The weight of the question hangs heavy, filling the air like thunder before it strikes. There is no turning back. Determination shines through trembling resolve. "Yes, I am ready." The path through the marketplace was narrow, yet the whispers managed to follow her everywhere. Women stood in clusters, their voices just loud enough to sting. "She walks like she owns the place," one muttered, her tone laced with scorn. "If she can't give him a child, why does she even stay?" another added, drawing soft laughter from the group. Her steps didn't falter, though her fists clenched tightly at her sides. Her head remained high, and her gaze fixed forward, but the words hung heavy in the air, refusing to be ignored. At home, there was warmth, though it often felt fragile. A quiet voice tried to reassure her, soft but steady. "You are enough, always enough." The words lingered, a balm for a wound too deep to heal quickly. But the peace was short-lived, as a sharper voice cut through the room. "Enough for now, maybe, but without a child, what future is there? A man's name must live on." Silence followed, heavier than before. The quiet glance that passed between them said more than words ever could, and the weight of failure settled deeper into her chest. Memories had a way of creeping in when the night was quiet. There had been laughter once, bright and carefree, echoing by the riverbank. Children splashed in the water, their joy filling the air like music. She had been one of them, laughing so hard her sides ached, but the laughter faded as the memory darkened. She saw herself older, sitting before the healer. The room smelled of bitter herbs and desperation. Promises were made, remedies were tried, but nothing changed. The silence that followed each failure grew louder, drowning out the hope she once clung to. The search for answers led her to the elder, whose wisdom was as revered as it was feared. The elder's voice carried a weight that made even the air feel heavy. "The river holds many secrets," the elder began. "There is a spirit who lives beneath its waters, a giver of life to those who dare seek her." There was a pause, deliberate and foreboding. "But her gifts are not without cost. She binds those who call on her, chains them to promises they dare not break." The warning was clear, but desperation often drowned out reason. The elder's gaze sharpened. "Would you risk everything you have for the chance of what you desire?" The tale of the mermaid was known to many, though few spoke of it openly. She was said to be more beautiful than any human could imagine, her hair shimmering like silver under the moonlight. At midnight she rose from the river, her presence both enchanting and terrifying. The elder's voice grew darker. "There was a farmer once who sought her help. She granted his wish, but when he failed to keep his promise, she cursed his land. Nothing grew there again." The words lingered, heavy with the weight of caution. When the plan came to light, it was met with resistance. The quiet reassurance turned to sharp protests. "This is not the way. You don't need her." The desperation, once hidden, spilled out like a flood. "I can't live like this anymore. I can't watch you suffer because of me." The response was softer now, pleading. "We are enough as we are. Don't do this." But the resolve had taken root, and no argument could uproot it. By the fire that night, the silence stretched long and deep. In her hands, she held a small cloth, worn but cherished. She had stitched it herself, imagining the child who would one day hold it. The firelight danced on the fabric, but her mind was elsewhere. "If there's even a chance," she whispered to herself, the words trembling in the air. "I must take it." The preparations began with hands that trembled but did not stop. A bracelet, worn by her grandmother, shone faintly as it was placed in the woven basket. The cowrie shells clicked softly against each other, their sound oddly soothing. The fruits were fresh, their colors vibrant, and the basket seemed almost too beautiful to let go. Doubts clawed at her mind, but determination pushed them aside. This was her chance, her only chance. Before she could leave, she returned to the elder one last time. The elder's hand, rough and strong, gripped hers tightly. Their gaze was unflinching, piercing straight through her. "Remember, the river does not give freely. Every gift must be repaid." The warning was clear, sharper than before. The price is never simple. Do not forget this. That night, the house was quiet. The weight of what was to come hung heavily in this air. From the doorway, a figure watched her, eyes filled with worry and sadness. "Come back to me," came the soft plea. No response followed, only the sound of steps fading into the night. The door remained open long after she was gone, as though waiting for her to return. But she didn't look back. Her heart was set, and the river called to her. The mermaid's silver eyes gleamed as she spoke, her voice calm, yet filled with a strange power. "I will give you the child you desire, but you must never speak of me, Adama. If you do, I will take the child back." The words hung in the air, thick with the weight of a binding promise. Adama's hands trembled, but she steadied them, staring into the mermaid's eyes. "I swear, I will never break my vow." Her voice shook, but she made the pledge. Deep down, she was desperate. She had waited for so long, and now, the gift she had longed for was within her reach. Time passed, and Adama's belly grew with the life that she carried inside. The months seemed to drag, but the village buzzed with excitement at the miracle. When the day arrived, the child was born, small and perfect, with eyes that shimmered like the river at dawn, a soft glow that made the villagers gasp. "A miracle! Adama has been blessed," they whispered as they gathered outside her home, marveling at the child who had arrived against all odds. Kwame's heart swelled with joy as he lifted Nyala high above his head. "This is my daughter, a gift from the heavens." His laughter rang through the air, echoing the joy in his heart. But Adama couldn't join in the celebration fully. Her mind flashed back to the mermaid's warning. The price of this miracle would haunt her, and the memory of the vow she made filled her with guilt. Amma, Kwame's second wife, stood on the edge of the crowd, watching with narrowed eyes. She crossed her arms and muttered under her breath. A barren woman suddenly gives birth. Something isn't right. Her heart burned with jealousy, the darkness of suspicion taking root in her mind. How could she? Amma clenched her fists, her anger slowly building as she watched the adoration that surrounded Adama and Nyala. The whispers began soon after. The village women gathered in groups, exchanging glances and shaking their heads. Have you ever seen such a thing? Adama must have done something unnatural. The gossip spread like wildfire, each retelling of the miracle adding layers of doubt. The village that once embraced Adama now looked upon her with suspicion, and the joy of her daughter was clouded by the sting of rumors. Amma wasted no time in cornering Adama by the well. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the air. Tell me, how did you do it? No healer could help you. What magic did you use? Her eyes narrowed, demanding answers. Adama stood firm, gripping the water pot with both hands. She could feel the weight of Amma's words trying to force a confession from her. Nyala is a blessing, Amma. That is all you need to know. Her voice was steady, but inside, her heart raced. She knew the truth could never be spoken. Amma was not satisfied. She was determined to uncover the truth. That night, she went to Baba Tunde, the village elder, and whispered her doubts into his ear. Nyala is no ordinary child. Adama may have summoned dark spirits, she said, her voice low with fear and malice. Baba Tunde stroked his beard thoughtfully, his face grim. If this is true, we must protect the village. His voice was heavy with concern, but beneath it, there was a flicker of something else, something darker. The rumors continued to swirl, growing louder with each passing day. Villagers avoided Adama, their eyes filled with wariness and suspicion. What if she's a witch? What if the child brings a curse? The whispers followed her wherever she went, like a shadow she couldn't shake. She could feel their eyes on her, their doubts seeping into her skin, making her feel more and more isolated. Her heart ached with the old wounds of rejection, but she said nothing. She had made her choice, and she would stand by it. Amma's hatred grew, and with Baba Tunde's support, she began to plot. We will force her to confess, she said, her voice dripping with venom. Baba Tunde nodded, his eyes gleaming with a quiet resolve. Let the truth reveal itself. The day came when Amma, with Baba Tunde by her side, gathered the villagers outside Adama's home. Their eyes were cold, their voices harsh as they demanded the truth. Adama, tell us how Nyala came to be. The spirits demand the truth. The pressure in the air was thick. The villagers stood like a wall around Adama, their suspicion hanging over her like a storm cloud. Adama's hands trembled as she held Nyala close, the child's innocent eyes staring back at her. The mermaid's warning echoed in her mind. She had promised to keep the secret. She had promised. But now, the villagers were demanding answers. I will not speak, she whispered to herself, her resolve hardening. Baba Tunde raised his staff, his voice booming through the crowd. Adama, you stand accused of witchcraft. Deny it or face the consequences. His words struck like thunder. The villagers' eyes turned accusing, their faces twisted in suspicion. Adama looked around at the angry faces, her breath catching in her throat. Fear gripped her heart as she struggled to hold her silence. And then, just as the tension reached its peak, Nyala giggled. The sound was soft and sweet, a tiny spark of innocence in the chaos. The child's tiny hands reached out, brushing against Adama's cheek, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. Adama's heart fluttered, and she whispered to herself, I will not let them take you from me. Amma stepped forward, her voice slicing through the air. If you are innocent, swear it before the spirits. The crowd hushed, their eyes fixed on Adama, waiting for her to speak, to break. The weight of her vow pressed down on her like a heavy stone, and for a moment the room seemed to close in around her. She could feel the villagers' eyes piercing her, demanding the truth. But Adama stayed silent. Her gaze stayed on Nyala, the child she would protect at all costs. Amma steps into the center of the ceremony, her finger pointed sharply at Adama. This woman hides the truth about her daughter, Let her speak now. The crowd stirs, murmurs rising, eyes narrowing in suspicion. Adama clutches her daughter tightly, her breath shaky, her voice trembling. Please, leave my child out of this. She is innocent. Kwame stands by, trying to calm the crowd, but the tension only grows, thickening in the air like a storm. Babatunde raises his hand, demanding silence. Adama, if there is truth in Ama's words, you must confess before the spirits. The villagers chant, their voices rising in unison, echoing like the beating of drums. Speak the truth! Speak the truth! Adama's hands tremble as she looks down at Nyala, her heart heavy. The words in her chest weigh more than she can bear. Tears begin to flow, tracing paths down her cheeks as she gazes at the innocent child. I swore to protect you, but I cannot lie. She takes a deep breath, her chest tightening, and steps forward. I made a pact with the mermaid for a child. I begged her for this blessing. The crowd gasps, the murmurs shifting to disbelief, and a low rumble of thunder fills the air. The ground shakes as thunder cracks loudly, followed by the overwhelming sound of water rushing. The river, once calm, overflows, spilling beyond its banks, and from the water the mermaid rises. Her silver hair, once shining like moonlight, now dark and tangled, her voice booming across the land. You have broken your vow, Adama. Her eyes, glowing fiercely, turn to Adama. You swore to keep our secret, and now you must pay the price. Nyala's cries echo through the crowd, her tiny hands reaching desperately for her mother's arms. The villagers scatter, fear spreading faster than fire. Ama watches from the edge, her eyes wide with terror. But the mermaid's voice cuts through the air, sharp and unforgiving. But you, Ama, are no better. You came to me first, seeking Kwame's love, and you too broke your vow. The villagers turn, eyes now fixed on Ama in shock. Ama's legs tremble beneath her. She shakes her head, denying the truth. No, she lies. I never went to the river. The mermaid laughs, her voice echoing like a cruel wind. Shall I show them the truth? She waves her hand, and a vision appears above the river, shimmering like a ghost. The image is of Ama at the water's edge, on her knees, her hands raised in desperate supplication. Make Kwame love me, and I will give you anything. The vision flickers, showing her words, raw and desperate. The villagers gasp, the truth crashing over them like a wave. Whispers spread like wildfire, louder and faster. One woman, her voice sharp with anger, steps forward. You deceived us, Ama. You accused Adama to hide your own sin. Babatunde, his face dark with disappointment, shakes his head. You have brought shame upon us all. The mermaid's voice, now softer but filled with power, turns to Adama. You broke your vow out of love, but she broke hers out of greed. The spirits will decide your fates. The river grows still, the air heavy with silence. The villagers hold their breath, waiting for what comes next. Kneeling, they begin to chant prayers to the river, seeking forgiveness for their rash judgments. Adama holds Nyala close to her chest, whispering, Whatever comes next, I will protect you. Ama stands alone at the edge of the village, the sound of her footsteps lost in the wind. Her cries pierce the air. Please, forgive me, don't leave me alone. But the villagers do not respond. She is cast out, left to walk the path toward the forest, her voice fading into the distance. As the mermaid's figure begins to fade back into the river, her voice lingers, a final warning. Beware the price of broken promises. The villagers bow their heads, feeling the weight of her words. They kneel, silent, vowing never to take their blessings for granted again. The mermaid's eyes burn with a fierce, unyielding light. She stares at Adama, who trembles before her. You broke your vow, but your heart was pure. I will not take your life. Adama sinks to her knees, a flood of relief and sorrow rushing through her. Please, don't take Nyala. The mermaid's gaze softens, but her voice remains cold. Without warning, she pulls Nyala into the river, her arms around the child. Adama screams her name, the sound of her anguish echoing across the water. Nyala! The villagers stand still, their bodies frozen, their eyes wide with shock. The river, once wild and angry, begins to calm. Babatunde, his voice heavy with the weight of truth, speaks. The spirits have spoken. We must respect their will. Amma watches, her face twisted in guilt, but no one dares to speak. The crowd holds its breath, waiting for what comes next. The mermaid turns her wrath toward Amma. You, Amma, will walk these riverbanks until the spirits find you worthy of forgiveness. Amma collapses to the ground, her hands outstretched. Please, give me another chance. I'll do anything. Her voice cracks, but the river's silence is unforgiving. The mermaid disappears into the depths, leaving only the soft ripple of water behind. Amma's cries echo as she begins her long, lonely journey along the river. The villagers slowly begin to turn away, but one child tugs at his mother's sleeve, asking, "Will she ever come back?" The mother sighs and shakes her head, her voice quiet but firm. Only if the spirits allow it. Adama, her heart torn, returns to her home. She clutches Nyala's small blanket in her arms. The pain cuts deep, but she refuses to let it break her. Kwame stands beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. We still have each other. We'll heal together. Adama looks at him with a tearful yet determined face. Yes, we will. Months pass, and Adama, stronger than before, gathers the villagers under the great baobab tree. They sit before her, eager to listen. Her voice is heavy with wisdom and grief. I lost everything because I let my desperation lead me to dishonesty. Learn from my story. The villagers listen in silence, absorbing the lesson she is taught through pain and sacrifice. A young girl, her eyes full of curiosity, steps forward. Will you tell us the story of the river again? Adama smiles faintly, her heart lightened by the hope she sees in their faces. Only if you promise to listen with your hearts. The villagers begin to respect Adama for her strength and wisdom. Her story spreads, and the lesson of the river is passed from one generation to the next. On stormy nights, villagers whisper of Amma's shadow seen by the river. They say she sings to the spirits, pleading for mercy, her voice drifting on the wind. The elders, with heads bowed, lead the village in a prayer of thanks to the river spirits. Let us honor Adama's sacrifice by teaching future generations to avoid her mistakes, Babatunde declares, his voice steady with purpose. Adama, now older, becomes a beloved elder. Her story lives on, shared with children as they grow. They learn of her love for Nyala, the courage it took to confess her wrongs, and the dangers of breaking promises to the spirits. Her legacy endures, a beacon of truth and redemption. Though her heart aches, Adama finds peace in guiding others. One evening, she sits by the river, the water's surface reflecting the twilight. "Nyala," she whispers, her voice soft and filled with love. "I'll always love you. I hope you're happy, my child."